A desperate night, the parking garage reeked of oil and exhaust fumes as Natalie Harper's footsteps echoed against concrete walls. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat a warning she wished she had heeded hours ago. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting dancing shadows that made every corner a potential hiding place for the man she was desperately trying to escape. Trevor Walsh. Just his name sent ice through her veins. She'd thought breaking up with him 3 months ago would be the end of it. She'd changed her phone number, moved apartments, even switched her usual coffee shop. But Trevor had always been persistent. And tonight, that persistence had turned predatory. Her keys jangled in her trembling hand as she fumbled for her car. A beat-up Honda that represented freedom just 20 feet away. The elevator dinged behind her, and her blood froze. Heavy footsteps, unmistakable and deliberate, echoed through the concrete chamber. Natalie. Trevor's voice slithered through the air, thick with bourbon and barely contained rage. Did you really think you could hide from me? She spun around, her back hitting the cold metal of a nearby car. Trevor emerged from the shadows, his broad frame blocking the only exit route. His eyes, once charming and warm, now burned with possessive fury. A dark bruise colored his jawline, evidence of the bar fight that had landed him in jail last week. The fight that should have kept him locked up longer. Trevor, please. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Just let me go. It's over between us. His laugh was cruel, bouncing off the low ceiling. Over, baby. We'll never be over. You're mine. You've always been mine. He lunged forward, his meaty hand shooting out to grab her wrist. The grip was familiar, bruising and unrelenting. Natalie yanked backward, but Trevor's fingers only tightened, his other hand reaching for her throat. This was it. This was how her story would end. In a dark parking garage, another statistic. Another woman who couldn't escape. Let her go now. The voice cut through the garage like a blade, sharp, commanding, absolutely certain. Trevor's grip loosened, just enough for Natalie to turn her head. A figure stood near the entrance, backlit by the streetlights beyond. Even in silhouette, his presence radiated power. He moved forward with measured steps, each footfall deliberate, his expensive leather shoes clicking against concrete. As he entered the light, Natalie's breath caught. The man was striking, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His face was all sharp angles, a strong jaw, high cheekbones, and piercing blue eyes that held an intensity that made her stomach flip. Dark hair swept back from his forehead, and the watch on his wrist caught the light, a Patek Philippe that screamed wealth and influence. The stranger's intervention? Who the hell are you? Trevor snarled, but Natalie heard the uncertainty creeping into his voice. The stranger stopped 10 feet away. His hands relaxed at his sides, but his eyes were lethal. Someone who doesn't appreciate watching a man assault a woman in my building's parking garage, your building. Trevor scoffed, puffing out his chest. Listen, pretty boy, this is between me and my girlfriend. Walk away before you get hurt. The stranger's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. It was colder, more dangerous. She's not your girlfriend. And you have 3 seconds to release her before I make you. Trevor's hand tightened on Natalie's wrist, making her gasp. Or what? You'll call security. I'm not scared of some rich boy playing hero. In a movement so fluid it seemed choreographed, the stranger closed the distance between them. His hand shot out, gripping Trevor's wrist with precision. Natalie felt the immediate release of pressure as Trevor yelped, his grip on her breaking instantly. I don't need to call security, the stranger said. His voice barely above a whisper, but carrying absolute authority. I own this building. I own the security company. And if you don't leave right now, I'll own your future too. Starting with a restraining order and assault charges that will put you away for years. Trevor tried to wrench his arm free, but the stranger's grip was iron. Natalie watched, mesmerized, as this man she'd never met before controlled Trevor with minimal effort. There was no showboating, no excessive force, just quiet, overwhelming power. You don't know who you're messing with, Trevor spat, but his bravado was crumbling. Dominic Ashford, CEO of Ashford Industries. The stranger released Trevor's wrist with a slight push that sent him stumbling backward, and I know exactly who I'm dealing with. Trevor Walsh, currently on probation for assault, unemployed, and about to violate your restraining order conditions if you don't leave immediately." Trevor's face went pale. He looked between Dominic and Natalie, his jaw working, but no words came out. Finally, he pointed a shaking finger at Natalie. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Dominic stepped in front of Natalie, blocking her completely from Trevor's view. "You have 10 seconds before I call the police. I suggest you use them wisely." For a moment, tension crackled in the air, like electricity before a storm. Then Trevor, cursed under his breath, turned and stalked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed until they faded completely, swallowed by the night. An unexpected proposition, and Natalie sagged against the car, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. Adrenaline drained from her system, leaving her trembling and dizzy. Dominic turned to her, his expression softening slightly, though his eyes remained alert, watchful. "Are you hurt?" His voice had lost its steel edge, replaced with something gentler. She shook her head, rubbing her wrist where red marks were already forming. "No, I'm okay. Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up." Dominic's jaw tightened. He'll be back. Men like Trevor Walsh don't give up easily. The truth of his words settled over her like a shroud. She knew he was right. Trevor had found her despite all her precautions. He would find her again. "I'll get another restraining order," she said, but even to her own ears it sounded weak. "That's just paper," Dominic replied, studying her with those intense blue eyes. "You need real protection." Natalie straightened, trying to gather the shreds of her dignity. "I appreciate your help, Mr. Ashford, but I can take care of myself. Can you?" The question wasn't cruel, just brutally honest. "Where will you go tonight?" "Back to your apartment that he obviously knows the location of? To a friend's place he can stake out? A hotel he can track through credit cards?" Each question was another blow to her fragile sense of security. Natalie's eyes stung with unshed tears. She hated feeling helpless, hated that this man, this stranger, could see how truly vulnerable she was. "I have a proposition for you," Dominic said, his tone shifting to something more businesslike. "Come with me tonight. I can offer you protection, resources, a safe place where Trevor Walsh will never touch you again." Hope flickered in her chest, dangerous and desperate. Why would you do that for a stranger? Dominic was quiet for a moment, his gaze roaming over her face as if memorizing every detail. When he spoke, his words changed everything. "Because I need something from you in return. Something that benefits us both." He paused, and Natalie's heart began to race for an entirely different reason. "I need an heir, a child to carry on my legacy. Give me that, and I'll give you a life where you'll never have to fear anyone again." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and shocking. Natalie's mouth opened, then closed. Her mind spun, trying to process what he was asking.
"Oh, you want me to have your baby?"
She whispered, certain she'd misheard. "Yes," his answer was direct, unflinching. "I'll provide everything you need. The best medical care, financial security, legal protection that Trevor Walsh could never breach. You'll want for nothing. But you don't even know me." "I know enough." Dominic stepped closer, and she caught the scent of his cologne, something expensive and woodsy. "I know you're a fighter. I know you don't break easily. That's exactly what I need." Natalie's mind reeled. This was insane. Completely, utterly insane. Yet as she looked into Dominic Ashford's eyes, she saw no deception, only absolute certainty and something else. A hunger that had nothing to do with desire and everything to do with need. The decision, "This is crazy," she breathed, taking a step back. "You're asking me to have a child with a complete stranger in exchange for protection? That's not a proposition. That's a business transaction." "Exactly." Dominic's expression didn't change. "I'm not offering you romance or fairy tales, Natalie. I'm offering you survival in exchange for something I need. It's honest, clear, and mutually beneficial. And after I give you this child, you'll be set for life. Financially independent, legally protected, free to live however you choose." The clinical nature of it should have repulsed her. It should have sent her running in the opposite direction. But as she rubbed her bruised wrist, she thought about Trevor's rage-filled eyes and the certainty that he would come for her again. A different kind of fear took hold. The fear of dying at Trevor's hands. The fear of living in constant terror. The fear of never being free. "I need time to think," she said finally, her voice barely audible. Dominic nodded slowly. "You have until tomorrow night. But you're not safe out here. Tonight, at least. Come with me. Separate room, no obligations. Just safety while you decide." Natalie looked toward the exit where Trevor had disappeared. Then back at this mysterious billionaire who had materialized from nowhere with an impossible offer. Every instinct screamed that she was trading one cage for another. Yet something in Dominic's eyes, a flicker of something vulnerable beneath all that control, gave her pause. "One night," she agreed quietly. "Just one night to think." Dominic's expression shifted, relief flickering across his features so quickly she almost missed it. He gestured toward a sleek black car parked near the elevator, its windows tinted, its lines elegant and predatory. "After you," he said, as Natalie walked toward the car, her reflection caught in its polished surface. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Her life had just pivoted on an axis she couldn't have imagined 12 hours ago. Behind her, Dominic Ashford followed, silent and watchful. A man who had just offered her salvation with strings she couldn't yet fully comprehend. The car door opened, and Natalie slid inside, the leather cool against her skin. As Dominic settled beside her and the engine purred to life, she realized she was leaving behind more than just a parking garage. She was leaving behind the woman she used to be, stepping into a future that terrified and tempted her in equal measure. And somewhere in the city behind them, Trevor Walsh was plotting his next move, unaware that Natalie Harper had just found the one thing more dangerous than his obsession. A billionaire with his own agenda and the power to see it through, the gilded cage. Penthouse stretched before Natalie like a palace carved from glass and steel. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city's glittering skyline, each light a distant star in an urban constellation. The space was breathtaking, minimalist yet luxurious. All clean lines and expensive materials that whispered rather than shouted their worth. Dominic gestured toward a hallway branching off from the main living area. "Your room is the second door on the left. Everything you need should be there. If something's missing, just ask." Natalie clutched her small purse, suddenly aware of how out of place she looked in her waitress uniform and worn jacket. "Thank you," she managed, her voice small in the vast space. He studied her for a moment, those blue eyes unreadable. "Get some rest. We'll talk more in the morning." With that, he disappeared into what she assumed was his own bedroom, leaving her alone in the cavernous living room. The guest room was larger than her entire apartment. A king-sized bed dominated the space, dressed in ivory linens that probably cost more than her monthly salary. An en-suite bathroom gleamed with marble and chrome. The closet held a selection of women's clothing in various sizes. Tags still attached. Natalie sank onto the bed, her mind spinning. 24 hours ago, her biggest worry had been making rent. Now she was in a billionaire's penthouse. Considering an arrangement that sounded like something from a twisted fairy tale, she pulled out her phone. The cracked screen a reminder of Trevor's last rage when he'd smashed it against a wall. She'd had it repaired, but the spiderweb cracks remained. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. Trevor. It had to be. A knock startled her. Dominic stood in the doorway, now dressed in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He held a first aid kit. "Your wrist," he said simply. "Let me see it." She hesitated, then extended her arm. The bruises had darkened to an ugly purple. Dominic sat beside her on the bed, his movements careful as he examined the marks. His touch was gentle, clinical, yet something about having his hands on her skin made her pulse quicken. "No fractures," he said, applying a cold compress. "But you'll need to ice it regularly for the next few days. First aid?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "My mother was a nurse before she married my father. She insisted I learn said powerful men should know how to help, not just how to command. It was the first personal detail he'd shared, and Natalie found herself curious. Is she still alive? Your mother? The smile faded. She died when I was 16. Cancer. I'm sorry. Dominic's hand stilled on her wrist, his gaze distant. She wanted grandchildren, a legacy beyond the family business. I promised her I'd give her that before she died. He looked up, meeting Natalie's eyes. I've spent 20 years building an empire, but I've neglected that promise. Until now. Understanding dawned. This wasn't just about business or legacy in an abstract sense. This was personal, a debt to a dead woman he'd loved. So this arrangement, Natalie said softly, it's about keeping a promise to your mother. Partly. He secured the compress with medical tape. But it's also practical. I'm 35, Natalie. I've dated, had relationships, but I've never found someone I could envision building a life with. Trust doesn't come easily to me, and most women who enter my world want the money, the status, not the man. And you think I'm different? His eyes held hers. I think you're honest. You didn't come here looking for anything from me. You needed help, and I can provide that. In return, you can give me something I need. It's simple, clean, transactional. No pretense of love, no risk of heartbreak. The words should have sounded cold, but Natalie heard the vulnerability underneath. Dominic Ashford, for all his power and wealth, was protecting himself the only way he knew how. Growing attraction days blurred into a week. Natalie stayed in the penthouse, sleeping in the guest room while Dominic maintained a respectful distance. He left for work early each morning, returning late but always checking on her, ensuring she had everything she needed. She'd called her landlord, quit her waitressing job, and withdrawn from her old life with surprising ease. Dominic's lawyers were already working on restraining orders, and his security team monitored Trevor's movements. For the first time in months, she felt safe enough to sleep without nightmares. But safety came with complications. The more time she spent with Dominic, the more the lines blurred. He was nothing like Trevor. Where Trevor had been volatile and possessive, Dominic was controlled and respectful. Where Trevor had demanded, Dominic offered. One evening, she found him in the kitchen cooking. The sight was so domestic, so unexpected, that she stopped in the doorway. You cook? She asked, unable to hide her surprise. He glanced over his shoulder, a rare, genuine smile lighting his face. My mother's other insistence. She said a man who can't feed himself is helpless. He gestured to the stove where something delicious sizzled. Hungry? They ate together at the dining table, the city sprawling below them. Conversation flowed easier than it should have between two people in such a strange arrangement. Dominic asked about her childhood, her dreams before Trevor had consumed her life. She learned he played piano, loved old mystery novels, and had a weakness for terrible action movies. You're not what I expected, Natalie admitted, setting down her fork. What did you expect? Someone colder, more calculating. His expression grew serious. I can be both those things when necessary. Don't mistake kindness for weakness, Natalie. I got where I am by being ruthless when needed. The warning should have frightened her. Instead, it intrigued her. There was a duality to Dominic Ashford. The controlled businessman and the man who cooked dinner and asked about her dreams. Later that night, unable to sleep, Natalie wandered to the living room. She found Dominic at the piano, his fingers moving across the keys with surprising grace. The melody was haunting, melancholic. He looked up as she approached. Did I wake you? No, I couldn't sleep. She sat beside him on the bench, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. What are you playing? Something my mother taught me. His fingers continued their dance. She said music was the language of emotions we couldn't speak. Natalie watched his hands, strong and capable, coaxing beauty from the instrument. Play me something happy. Dominic shifted, the melody changing to something lighter, more playful. A smile tugged at his lips as he played, and Natalie found herself mesmerized. Not by the music, but by the man creating it. When the last note faded, silence wrapped around them. Dominic turned to her, and suddenly the space between them felt charged, electric. His eyes dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. Natalie, he said, his voice rough. If you stay here much longer, this arrangement won't stay simple. Her heart hammered against her ribs. What if I don't want simple? The question hung between them, dangerous and irrevocable. Dominic's hand came up, his fingers brushing her cheek with a tenderness that made her breath catch. You should want simple, he murmured. You should want clear boundaries and no complications. But you don't. This wasn't a question. His thumb traced her lower lip. No, I don't. The kiss, when it came, was inevitable. His lips met hers softly at first, a question rather than a demand. Natalie answered by pressing closer, her hands fisting in his shirt. The kiss deepened, becoming urgent, hungry, months of tension and unspoken desire pouring into that single point of connection. Dominic pulled back, breathing hard, his forehead resting against hers. This changes things. I know. The arrangement was supposed to be clinical. Artificial insemination, distance, no emotional entanglement. Natalie's hand came up to cup his face. And now, his eyes, when they met hers, burned with an intensity that sent heat flooding through her body. Now I want you. Not as a transaction. Not as an arrangement. Just you? The danger returns the next morning. Natalie woke wrapped in Dominic's arms, sunlight streaming through the windows. They'd made love through the night, the clinical arrangement dissolving into something raw and real. She traced patterns on his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Good morning, he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. She looked up at him, seeing vulnerability in his expression that hadn't been there before. Are you okay with this? With us? Dominic's arms tightened around her. I don't know what this is, Natalie. I don't do relationships. Don't let people in. But you're already here. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. So yes, I'm okay with it. Terrified, but okay. The admission made her chest ache. She was falling for him, this complicated. Guarded man who'd saved her and asked for the impossible in return. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Dominic reached for it, then froze, his expression hardening. He handed it to her without a word. The text was from an unknown number. But Natalie knew who it was. Hiding with your rich boyfriend won't save you. I'm watching. I'm waiting. You're still mine. Ice flooded her veins. Trevor had found a way to reach her, despite all the precautions. Dominic was already out of bed, pulling on clothes with swift, controlled movements. Pack a bag. We're leaving. Where? My estate, upstate. More secure, harder to access. He was on his phone, barking orders to his security team. Trevor's escalating. We need to disappear for a while. Within an hour, they were in Dominic's private car, the city shrinking behind them. Natalie watched it go, feeling like she was leaving one life and entering another. Dominic's hand found hers, squeezing gently. He won't touch you, he said, his voice steel. I promise you that. But even as she nodded, even as she tried to believe him, a chill ran down her spine. Trevor didn't make empty threats. And now she had something precious to protect. Not just herself, but the tentative, fragile thing growing between her and Dominic. Something that felt dangerously like love. The discovery the estate was a fortress disguised as a mansion. All stone walls and iron gates nestled in acres of private land. Security cameras dotted the property, and Dominic's team maintained a constant presence. For the first time in weeks, Natalie felt like she could breathe. They fell into an easy rhythm. Mornings were spent in the sunroom, Dominic working on his laptop while Natalie read. Afternoons they explored the grounds, and evenings were theirs alone, filled with conversation, laughter, and a passion that seemed to grow stronger each day. But something was changing in Natalie's body. A persistent nausea that struck at odd hours, a tenderness in her breasts, an exhaustion that sleep couldn't cure. She tried to ignore it, tried to pretend it was stress. But deep down, she knew. One morning, while Dominic was on a conference call, she slipped into the village nearby and bought a pregnancy test. Her hands shook as she took it in the estate's guest bathroom, her heart pounding as she waited for the results. 2 lines. Positive, she was pregnant with Dominic's child. The realization should have brought joy. This was what they'd agreed to. what he'd asked for. But fear gripped her instead. The arrangement had been about producing an heir in a controlled, clinical way. What they had now was messy, emotional, real. Would a child complicate that? Would Dominic see her differently, not as the woman he was falling for, but as the vessel carrying his legacy? She hid the test, her mind spinning with questions she couldn't answer. That night, as they lay in bed, Dominic's arms around her, she almost told him. But the words stuck in her throat, trapped by fear. "You're quiet tonight," he observed, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "Just thinking about us, what this is becoming." Dominic shifted, turning to face her in the darkness. "What do you want it to be?" The question hung heavy between them. Natalie's heart raced. "I want it to be real. Not an arrangement, not a deal. Just us choosing each other." His hand came up to cup her face. "I never expected you, Natalie. Never expected to feel this way. I told myself I was incapable of love, that I'd closed that part of myself off. But you've proven me wrong." Her breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you." The words were quiet but certain. "I don't know how it happened, or when, but I do. This stopped being about an arrangement the moment I kissed you." Tears pricked her eyes. "I love you too. That's what terrifies me." "Why?" "Because everything felt too perfect, too fragile. Because she was carrying his child and didn't know if it would change everything. Because Trevor was still out there, waiting." Before she could answer, an alarm shrieked through the estate. Dominic was on his feet instantly, pulling on clothes. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice hard. "Lock the door behind me." "What's happening?" "Perimeter breach." He was already moving toward the door. "My security team will handle it." Natalie grabbed his arm. "Dominic, wait." He turned, and in his eyes she saw the warrior beneath the gentleman. "I'll come back to you. I promise." He kissed her hard, then was gone. She locked the door, her heart hammering. Minutes stretched into an eternity as she heard shouts, the sound of footsteps running. Then, a single gunshot cracked through the night. Natalie's scream caught in her throat. She pressed her ear to the door, trying to hear anything that would tell her Dominic was safe. Silence, heavy and suffocating, pressed in from all sides, then footsteps running toward the room. The doorknob rattled. "Natalie, open up." "It's me," Dominic's voice. She flung open the door, and he pulled her into his arms, both of them shaking. "What happened?" "Trevor." Dominic's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "He got past the outer perimeter. My team intercepted him before he reached the house." "The gunshot." "Warning shot. He's in custody now, being transferred to police." He pulled back, his hands framing her face. "It's over. He can't hurt you anymore." Natalie's legs gave out, and Dominic caught her, lowering them both to the floor. Sobs racked her body, not just from fear, but from relief, from the weight of months of terror finally lifting. "I've got you," Dominic murmured, holding her tight. "You're safe now. I've got you." The truth revealed the next morning. Natalie knew she couldn't hide the truth any longer. She found Dominic in his study, staring out at the estate grounds where security was being reinforced. "We need to talk," she said quietly. He turned, concern immediately flooding his features. "What's wrong?" She sat on the leather sofa, her hands twisting in her lap. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Dominic's expression shifted through surprise, confusion, then something that looked like wonder. "You're certain?" She nodded. "I took a test a few days ago. I wanted to tell you, but I was scared." He crossed to her, kneeling in front of her, his hands covering hers. "Scared of what?" "That it would change things between us. That you'd see me differently, as just the mother of your heir instead of—" She trailed off, unable to finish. "Instead of the woman I love?" Dominic's voice was gentle. "Natalie, this doesn't change how I feel about you. If anything, it makes me love you more." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "But the arrangement, the deal we made, forget the arrangement." He pulled her close. "That was before. Before I knew you, before I fell in love with you. This child isn't part of a transaction anymore. It's ours, created from what we've found together. But what if I'm not ready? What if I can't be the mother you need me to be? Dominic pulled back, his eyes searching hers. You're already everything I need. Strong, brave, beautiful. Our child will be lucky to have you as a mother. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust in the future he was painting, but doubt lingered, a shadow she couldn't shake. What happens now? She whispered. Now? A smile touched his lips, transforming his face. Now we build a life together. Not because of an arrangement, but because we choose to. Marry me, Natalie. Not as part of a deal, but because I can't imagine my life without you. The proposal stole her breath. She searched his face, seeing only love and certainty reflected back. Yes, she breathed. Yes, I'll marry you. Dominic kissed her then, tender and sweet, a promise sealed in that single touch. The final confrontation 2 weeks later, as Natalie and Dominic prepared for a small, intimate wedding, news came that Trevor had been released on bail pending trial. The news sent ice through Natalie's veins. Can't come near you, Dominic assured her, his arm around her shoulders. The restraining order is ironclad, and my security team is on high alert. But that night, as Natalie lay awake, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She rose quietly, not wanting to wake Dominic, and moved to the window. The grounds were dark, peaceful, but something felt wrong. A shadow moved near the tree line. Her heart stopped. Before she could scream, Dominic was beside her, his phone already out, alerting security. Get away from the window, he commanded, pulling her back. But it was too late. Glass shattered as something crashed through, and Trevor was there, wild and desperate, a gun in his hand. You thought you could hide from me? He snarled, the weapon trained on Dominic. You thought your money could keep you safe? Natalie stepped between them, her heart hammering. Trevor, please, don't do this. Don't do this. His laugh was unhinged. You're pregnant with his child, Natalie. You were supposed to be mine. Only mine. Dominic moved to pull her behind him, but Trevor's gun swung toward her. Don't move, rich boy, or I'll shoot her. Time seemed to slow. Natalie saw Dominic's muscles tense, saw the calculation in his eyes. You don't want to hurt her, Trevor. You love her. I do love her. That's why I can't let you have her. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Security was coming, but not fast enough. Trevor's finger tightened on the trigger, and Natalie saw her death in his eyes. Dominic lunged. The gun went off, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Natalie screamed as both men went down, grappling for the weapon. Security burst through the door, pulling Trevor off Dominic, restraining him as he fought and cursed. Dominic. Natalie dropped to her knees beside him. Blood bloomed across his shoulder, but he was conscious, his hand finding hers. I'm okay, he gasped. Just a graze. Paramedics arrived, and as they worked on Dominic, Natalie held his other hand, her tears falling freely. She'd almost lost him, almost lost everything. Trevor was dragged away, his screams fading. This time, there would be no bail, no second chances. The beginning, 3 months later. Natalie stood in a small chapel, her hand on her growing belly, as Dominic slipped a ring onto her finger. His shoulder had healed completely, leaving only a faint scar, a reminder of how close they'd come to losing each other. Love you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I love you too, she replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. They'd started with an arrangement, a cold transaction meant to fulfill separate needs, but they'd found something neither had expected. Real love. Messy and complicated and absolutely perfect as they kissed. Sealing their vows, Natalie felt their child move inside her. A flutter of life that represented their future. Trevor was in prison, facing decades behind bars. The nightmares had faded, replaced by dreams of the life they were building. Dominic pulled back, his forehead resting against hers. Ready to start our forever? Natalie smiled, her hand covering his on her belly. I've been ready since the night you saved me. They walked out of the chapel into sunlight hand in hand, no longer bound by an arrangement, but by choice, by love, by the unshakable certainty that they'd found in each other what they'd been searching for all along. A home. a future, a love worth fighting for.